Then we go to the physical. As I said, we're going to look at stance, driving with force through, not to, controlled balance and agility. Stance is the first thing I always start off. I got the pleasure to actually go with Coach Yonkis and Coach Herb Damon, who's now at U of T, to go listen to the guy who's on the screen, the Charles Bentley talk in Cleveland. And this one phrase right here, something that always stuck with me. Efficiency is speed in the box. And if you have any wasted movement, you're putting yourself at a deficit that you're already in a deficit. As large humans playing against more athletic humans, we are already at a deficit. And if you have wasted movement, you're going to put yourself in an even bigger deficit. And why would you ever want to be in a debt, right? Why would you ever want to be in a physical debt or a debt of any kind? It's not worth it. You need to be efficient in order to be fast in the box. And if you're looking for something to kind of give you more specifics, I'm actually going through reading this. It summarizes a lot of the stuff that we were very, very privileged to listen to him speak at in Cleveland. But it goes into some of the scientific basics, some of the mental sides about how to actually coach offensive linemen and offensive line athletes, I should say, to biomechanically and mentally get them to where they need to be. I'm working through this one right now. I'm really enjoying it. But as I said, it's something that we kind of already had summarized in a 2-day presentation in Cleveland. So if you're ever looking for something to help you and have something to reference, this would be an awesome thing for you to look at. But when we're looking at stance, it's so often the most underworked part of an O-lineman's foundation. Everybody that's ever played O-line has the story of how they were taught to get into the stance, right? It's, bend over like you're sitting on a toilet, stick your hand like you're playing in the dirt, and make room for your belly, right? Like Jax, do you want to talk about your situation? Like, I know you've got a story about that when you were taught it.
I played O-line and D-line, so I was in high school. So like many people do, and I was kind of rushed, into the O-line world. And I just remember I'm trying to remember the specific story you're recalling here, Coach Scotto. We've been hashing things back and forth so much. You know more about me now than I do myself. But I just remember basically once you had a good enough stance, because especially at any high school, no matter how good the high school is, and I was fortunate to play for a great high school team, but once you have a decent stance, you rarely are going to get coached beyond that, because now you have a decent stance. There's 8 other offensive linemen. You're probably better than at least 6 of them. So those 6 guys, the coach has all their hands full, just trying to get those 6 guys in a decent stance. Right. Yeah. So I think it's one of those things where people hit a ceiling, and then the ceiling in that fundamental ultimately limits how much better they can get. But I just remember it being so rushed, and basically, get your palms on your knees and then put your hand in the dirt. And, as long as you weren't offside or, but too high in the air, you were all right. But yeah, no,
hit the guy hard.
Undervalued skill. That was one of the first things, when I got to university, that you notice, man, I've spent my whole life playing football and I don't know anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How have I even gotten here?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So as Coach just said, it's one of those most underworked skills, right? And when we talk about skills, skills are something you have to intentionally work on. And stance, whether you're a first-time offensive line player or you're a 4th-year All-Canadian, stance is still something that you have to stay on top of. It's a practice skill. Your body's going to change over time. You're going to get stronger. You're going to get injured. You're going to have changes. You're going to get taller. You're going to get bigger. You're going to add weight. You're going to lose weight. Over time, you still have to work on your stance all the time. So, for example, Coach Jax talked about Bryce that got drafted in the 2nd round this year. Bryce was always tinkering his entire career, and then now he's adding center even more to his game, and he's tinkering with that all the time. Every day he's working on that, trying to find the little bit that can help him, whether it's moving his foot up, up his stance or down his stance an inch, raising his butt up or down an inch, leaning over with his shoulders or back, forward or back an inch. Finding every little piece is massive, even though, the guy got drafted 11th overall and he's still trying to fix it and make sure he's at his best. It's a practice skill, and it's not something that, the athlete just goes and does on their own. It's something that as the coach, you have to have ideas in your head of what are the cues that they need to exhibit in order for them to feel correct. So every body is the same. It is different. Not every body is the same, but they can all have the same cues. They can all have the same body feel, right? But philosophically, if we're going back to that foundation idea, The stance is your true foundation. If your foundation is cracked, the house will fall. So I have very little chance of success if I have a poor stance. I have a much larger chance of success if my foundation is strong, if my stance is strong. If I have an efficient stance and a strong stance, I give myself, the athlete that is at a deficit on a football field, the most opportunity for success. Anytime we step foot on the football field, we want the most opportunity for success. The best way to get there, not the easiest, but the best way to get there is to have a good stance, to have an efficient stance. So these are some of the things that I use, that I'm looking for. And a lot of people, as I said, like have the story of bend your knees, think you're sitting on the toilet, um, and put your hand in the dirt. And I just read this quote from Charles Bentley in his book, like, everybody thinks you need to get lower, you need to get lower, you need to get lower. Has anybody on this call ever at any point felt strong at the bottom of a squat or while you're sitting on the toilet? It's just not a thing. Like, you don't feel strong there. So why would we use that as a coaching cue? That's not a position of strength. And biomechanically, you can look into it. Biomechanically, it's not a position of strength. But why would we ask our athletes to pretend like they're sitting on a toilet when that's not a position of strength? We're not leading them to success. So we need to be mindful of the cues we're using to help them be successful. So I'm looking at the chin. That's probably the first thing I'm looking at, to be honest, especially with young athletes. I want to make sure their eyes are up and they're looking at the defense. You only get one brain. If you don't take care of it, you're not going to be playing football very long, and you're not going to have a great long life. You got to be able to see what you're trying to hit so you can keep your forehead out of it. We're trying to keep the shoulder blades pinched. I don't want like full retraction, but I want that back engaged. I want my hips and shoulders square to the line of scrimmage. I want my kick knee inside the big toe. So my backside foot and my backside leg, I want that knee inside the big toe. My kick foot is going to have a subtle angle out. I usually talk about like 130. Some guys are at 1, some guys are at 2. Really depends on the person. I want palms on the knees. For me, palms on the knees and keeping that shoulder girdle kind of engaged allows me to keep everything in the shoulder girdle, chest area engaged and be powerful. And then I want my elbows tight to the body. I don't want big flare. Anytime I have big flare with my elbows, it ruins the chain of force that I'm establishing through my entire body. And I end up only being able to use my tricep instead of every piece of force that's being applied throughout my body, down from my ankles, up through my hips, into my shoulders, and in through my hands. When I flare my elbows, I break that chain. So I'm going to switch my window here, go to the film. I'll try and keep it, I'll keep it slow as much as I can. If you're teaching somebody to get into a stance the first time, this is how I do it. It seems kind of silly that they're starting with their heels together right now. But I personally like it this way because I could set one foot and keep it in the ground. So I'm going to keep one foot in the ground. In this instance, these guys are going to be moving their left foot. So they're going to be getting into a left-handed stance. So they're going to start with their feet together, and they're going to basically put a little bit of extra weight on their inside foot. Not to say that they're going to be 60-40 or 55-45. It's just to let there be a little bit of room so that their outside foot can fall. And all they're trying to do is get to a comfortable position somewhere around shoulder width, right? Shoulder width is kind of the base. Some guys are minus an inch, some guys are more than an inch, some guys are bang on, right? You got to let them play with it. They got to find that position of power. Then I'm going to ask them to bring their foot back. Some of these guys are a little ahead, but if we're looking at this one, we're going to start with a base of bringing our foot, our backside foot, our kick foot, the big toe to about the midfoot of our front foot, our post foot. We're going to start there. Again, vertically, some guys are plus minus an inch. We got to find our position of power. And then, as I said, we're going to have some of that foot tilt. So if you see right here, you can see the foot tilt, and you can see my foot tilt. I talk about 130. Some guys go to 1, some guys go to 2. If you go past 2, you're a very, very weird athlete. But if you feel strong there and it works, right, let it work. And then we're going to put our palms on. And at this point, you can see our hips are not square to the line of scrimmage. Our hips are not square to the line of scrimmage. But then we're going to lock. Remember, we got to have that knee, that kick knee inside our big toe. So what you're going to see is them lock that knee in, and that puts us into a position of power. From this point, we should be squeezing the adductors and engaging the glute, and our elbows should be tight into our body. Our shoulder blades should be holding that $50 bill. and we should be ready to go. So we do that at a left-handed stance. That's a side angle, which we don't need to worry about. You do the same thing out of a right-handed stance. I teach my guys both stances all the time, 100%. You need to be versatile and be able to play both. Right? You can really see it with him right now, how far angled away he is, and then you can see him get all squared up. Right? That's a gorgeous stance. That's a first-year kid who just learned that this year. You can see it really well from the side cut. So he gets parallel, foot drop, foot pivot, palms on, bend it down, lock it in. Gorgeous, right? This is an example of a kid who had never learned this ever in his life. And over the course of a year, he got really, really good at it. Less than a year. This is an example of a guy who's probably more of the minus an inch, right? That works for some guys. And then over here on this back end is a guy who's probably more of a plus an inch guy. So then what we can develop eventually is walk-ins. We call them walk-ins, where we're just going to walk up to line of scrimmage and get in the stance, right? He's more of a plus an inch guy, plus he's probably about a 1 o'clock guy. We're going to walk into the stance. He does it out of the left hand as well. And this is kind of building the skill of being able to get into a stance on the line of scrimmage, right? And then we can build it up with more guys where we're actually going to walk out, get into the stance as if we're at the line of scrimmage. And then we can build it out where we're then going to, quote unquote, break the huddle. One of my guys being a little silly, right? We get a little bit pep in our step and we break it into our stance. And now you can see his stance is affected a little bit. It doesn't look quite the same. So he's still working on this skill, right? Whereas the other guys are a little older and they're a little better with it. And then you can see it. I got on them after that first rep. Give me some pep. You're breaking the huddle. And they get to the line of scrimmage. So this is a skill you can work on with your guys right now, right? You could go out on a field after tomorrow or whatever the date is that we're allowed to do that again, right? You can go out on a field and do this with your guys when you're allowed right now with no contact, and it's a skill you can work on. And then I go progressive fives. So we get into the stance, and then we quote unquote, it's like a get off, right? Where I'm going to get off. I don't really like these get offs, but it's more so just to get them out of the stance and back in it. We're not focusing on any specific steps or anything like that. So that's how we can progress through the stance. Go back.
I love the comment about it being a skill. Again, I think a lot of people think like, hey, I'm a U Sport football player. I know how to get in a stance. Every play starts with a stance. You know, I'm a scholarship athlete. I know how to get in a stance, right? But again, if you were to look at your players, like no one's ever going to watch a game film and go, wow, we ran 70 plays and I liked all, 350 stances of my 5 offensive linemen. Not one time was the stance not what I wanted. Not one mistake, came from whether it's, and a lot of the times, like, and we would talk about this, and we had the benefit of spending so much time in the same line room together. So you get the coaching points over like 4 years, you start to realize which ones are meaningful, and it was, hey, that step was an inch too short because your stance was 2 inches too wide, right? Or that first step was 2 inches too long because your stance was too long. So you wide stance, you have to take a long step to get out of it, right? Or we talk about, you can't be explosive out of a position that's not efficient, and all of a sudden. Look at what that translates to, and people make the coaching point. You got to move your feet, get lower, get off the ball. Like those are all general, non-prescriptive things. And I think, you mentioned how we spent that time with Irv down at that clinic, and a guy that we both played for and both worked with. That was one of the things that I always respected a ton about him is he spent very little time saying things that weren't meaningful, right? Yeah. Like it would be, hey, your stance was 2 inches too wide, right? And that was something you could change in the moment, your next rep, instead of going into that next rep going, oh, I got to get off the ball or I got to move my feet, right? Yeah. Well, it's not like I got in my stance and thought, you know what, I'm going to try not moving my feet on this one. Let's see how it goes. I just think it's, if there's any athletes watching this, like I hope there are, I put it out on our Cambridge Lions channel too for guys, like it is a meaningful skill. It is a meaningful skill. And if it's not practiced, you won't be excellent at it like anything else.
And that goes for every position, like every position on the football team. Like if you talk to advanced position coaches, like university position coaches, they will work on your stance that's the first thing they will fix. They don't care, if you're a receiver, they don't care if you don't break at the 12-yard in very well, right? They don't care about that unless your stance is good, right? You got to make sure your stance setup is good first, right?